Good morning, welcome, good afternoon, or good evening indeed, wherever you may be in the world. Tuning in to our opening session for the very first VegfestUK Summerfest Online event. I'm very happy to be hosting this online event, going out free all over the world. The people can attend from all over the world, and we have a number of live streams throughout the weekend, today and again tomorrow, Sunday. There's a whole schedule on the websites to tell you what and when. And of course, there's also some fantastic exhibitors in the exhibiting hall that I'm sure viewers will want to visit. The show is live the weekend. It then stays open days after the event for people to kind of catch up on any of the presentations. And indeed, this very live stream will be available as a recorded option, probably from 24 hours after the completion. So we've got some excellent panelists throughout the weekend. There's presentations that you can watch at any time, but there's also the live streams where we're joined live by a number of panelists for a number of subjects from across the globe, and none other than our opening session, which is an absolute thrill to be able to host and welcome the Vegan Women's Leadership Network. This is a new initiative that has been launched during lockdown. It's now fully fledged, active, up and running, and it's an absolute privilege and a pleasure to be able to introduce Katrina Fox, the founder of the Vegan Women's Leadership Network, to then take on this panel and of course introduce our wonderful panelists. Katrina was opening our show yesterday with a vegan trade talk, and is today hosting this one. And again tomorrow. Katrina Fox, thank you very much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you so much, Tim, and a huge thank you to VegfestUK for giving the platform to elevate vegan women's voices. So we're delighted to be partnering with you and really appreciate everything you do. I know VegfestUK has always been diverse and accessible, so this is just another example of that. So it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Welcome everyone to the live stream panel by Vegan Women's Leadership Network on finding your voice as a leader in the animal advocacy and vegan movement. I am absolutely delighted to be joined by some wonderful panelists from across the globe. It truly is an international platform. Now, this is interactive, so we do want you to join in. There is a button, it's a Q&A button. If you want to press that at any time, you can type in your question and we will check for questions as we go through and also at the end. So we do encourage you to ask your questions. Depending on what kind of device you're using, if it's on a laptop, the Q&A button is probably towards the bottom, but if you're using a mobile or a tablet device, it might be on one or either side. So just look for the Q&A button to ask your questions. So without further ado, I'm going to do a brief introduction of our panelists. We have Alokparna Sengupta, and Alokparna is the Managing Director of Humane Society International in India, which is the world's largest animal protection organisation in the world. It's a not-for-profit organisation. It has several affiliates throughout the world, and Alokparna heads up the one in India. And she's worked in animal protection for around about a decade now, and that includes serving on committees such as government and scientific committees and other stakeholder committees in order to bring in animal-friendly policies in India. So welcome, Alokparna. Great to have you here today.
Great to be here, Katrina. Thank you. And thank you to VegfestUK for having us here. I've always wanted to be in the UK for this so that I can, have a lot of vegan food, but yeah.
Oh, Hopefully not in the
Something's
not
better than
too
nothing.
distant future. Yeah, for sure. We've got Kathy Devine. Kathy is a vegan author, publisher, and disability rights advocate in Australia. She is the founder of the Australian Vegans Journal, and she's written several books, including Plant-Powered Women and Plant-Powered Men and Vegans Are Cool. And she also founded the Plant-Powered Women's Leadership Conference series. Kathy's latest book is called Golden Age Politics, and it's a call to action for vegans, particularly vegan women, to take up positions of influence in both business and also the political arena. Welcome, Kathy. I think you've got to unmute. Remember to unmute yourself. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thanks to VegFest as well for having me.
Wonderful. Now, also in Australia, we've got Clare Mann. Clare is a vegan psychologist and communications trainer. And Clare is the author of several books, including Dystopia, the anguish of being vegan in a non-vegan world. And that's actually based on a term that Clare herself coined, dystopia. And her latest book, Myths of Choice, Why People Won't Change and What You Can Do About It. Welcome, Clare.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here and in setting with everyone else. Thank you to VegFest, who it's a shame we can't be in person, but it's a great substitute.
Fantastic. And finally, we're delighted to welcome Carolina Galvani, who is the founder of Sinergia Animal. I hope I said that right. We were practicing beforehand. I don't know if I got it right. Sinergia Animal in Brazil, which is an international animal protection organization that's committed to ending the worst practices of industrial animal agriculture, particularly in the countries in the global south. So, for example, Southeast Asia and Latin America. I know it's really early in the morning where you are, Carolina. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here today. And although it's 7 a.m., it's still worth it. So thank you very much. Very excited and very grateful to be here.
Wonderful. So I've done a little bit of a brief introduction of all of you, but what I'd love to know from all of you before we get stuck into some of the issues is tell us about how and why you got involved and became involved in the animal advocacy and vegan movement. So a brief summary of your journey to here at where you are today. So let's start with Alokparna.
Why? Because I always wanted to help animals some way or the other. But being a hardcore non-vegetarian, I didn't realize that what I was doing was also exactly antithesis of what I wanted to do. And I was in my first job as a research analyst when I realized that I'd rather die than do that job. And then I sort of found my calling, and while trying to pave a career in animal protection, I realized that I must be also very honest to these animals which I want to help. And that's when I it actually started when I was volunteering at a shelter, and I saw a person holding a chicken and going into the vet to show it to the vet. And something suddenly clicked, and I was like, okay, you know, this chicken can also be somebody's pet or be loved by somebody. And yeah, that sort of clicked in my mind, and I turned vegetarian and then soon enough vegan.
Wonderful. I love that. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Clare.
Thank you. I always, in answering this, I say, do we want the long version or the short version? I think we've all got those stories. And like so many people, started my journey as a vegetarian because I became aware of what was happening in slaughterhouses at the age of 17. And unfortunately, didn't look further. And I always say to people, always think back to those days, because I wish somebody had told me then. We all say, if I knew now what I knew then, what I know now, I would have been vegan on the spot. And I think 99% of the population would be. So it's very important that we continue to speak out and have those bold and courageous conversations. And I've been a psychologist now for 30 years, but 10 years ago, when my eyes were open to the woeful inadequacy of being vegetarian, you save the parents, but you don't save the children if you're a vegetarian, is that I realized of all the work I'd ever done, when I found what was going on, I honestly didn't know I could hurt that much. And for 10 years, that burning within me has stayed within me. So my aim is to empower, you know, other vegans and to be the change we want to see in the world.
Wonderful. I love that. Carolina. Because you've got a very interesting journey. I noticed when I was looking up, you've got a similar background to myself in journalism, and I know you've worked as an investigative journalist for some quite major not-for-profit organisations like Compassion in World Farming, Greenpeace and more. So yeah, tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
So it started in 2006. I was living in the UK and I was finishing my master's degree in international journalism. And at the time, I was very much focused on social and environmental issues. That's what I wanted to specialize in. And I got, yes, I was a volunteer for an investigative agency, EcoStorm. And I went with them to Portugal as an interpreter. And the documentary was about factory farming. So we visited many different farms. We covered many different species, laying hens, pigs, cattle, even fur animals. And we also went to a pig slaughterhouse. I was already vegetarian at the time, but for health reasons. And it was really the first time I got in contact with factory farming. And it was very powerful because it was right there in front of me. It was not a video or anything you see, you know, from a distance. After that, I kept working with investigations for about 10 years. The themes were diverse. We still kept covering social and environmental issues as well. But animals became most important thing for me. Of course, my life changed completely after I witnessed so much suffering. And that's why I decided that I would dedicate my life to help farmed animals. So that's the story. And after working with investigations, I worked with major animal protection organizations as well, such as the Humane Society International in Brazil, Foro Animal, which is the largest network of animal protection NGOs in Brazil. And in 2017, I founded Synergia Animal. So that's the story.
Wonderful. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And Kathy, tell us about how you came to the whole animal advocacy and veganism.
Thanks, Katrina. So my why is because I love animals, like everybody else said here. That's just simple as that. How I came, it probably started to gear up in 2006 when television started, and I was a part of that, and I still am. It's an international vegan television station. Then in 2009, I started my own project called Vegans Are Cool, because at that time, veganism wasn't in the mainstream very much, and it wasn't cool at all really in the minds of the mainstream population. So I set the challenge to myself to make vegans cool. So that started with a blog. That became a book called Vegans Are Cool. And so I've published, including Golden Age Politics, 6 books on a vegan theme. And I then started a magazine called Australian Vegans Journal, which is free to download from australianvegans.com.au. And then I did some conferences for vegan women. So yeah, that's about it. That's the quick version.
Wonderful. I love how you all summarised your, when I said a brief summary, you stuck to the brief. I love that. That's brilliant, because we have got some questions, and I'm sure we've got a lovely group of people tuning into this, so I'm sure I've also got some questions. But what I love is the diversity. Everybody's come to this, to animal advocacy and veganism, in such different and varying ways. And you know, I've said this before, there's no one way to do activism. There's so many different ways we can do it. We can look at what our skills are and make a contribution, and I think that's certainly reflected in our panel today. So thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm curious, in terms of, you know, we're all vegan. So how was that received by your family, your friends, and your colleagues? You know, because I know now, you know, we're in 2020, veganism's become kind of a bit more cool and trendy than it was certainly when I went vegan 24 years ago. But still, you know, there are some stereotypes around, and not everybody's necessarily cool with it. So I'm just curious, you can talk just briefly about what some of the initial reactions were from your family, friends, and colleagues, and how you handled any negative of reactions. Let's start with Carolina. I'm curious because you're in a country, you know, that kind of area. I mean, obviously we're all kind of, the whole world's kind of heavy meat, but I know particularly in Latin America, you know, there's quite a big focus on meat and that whole kind of culture. So can you talk us through a little bit about some of the reactions you got?
Sure. Yeah, it's quite interesting because the city where I grew up in Brazil holds the largest rodeo party in the country. So it's pretty much a city where farming is very important for people and for the local economy as well. With my family, it was never a problem. Actually, my brother is vegan. My younger brother is flexitarian. My mother is very supportive, and she was very supportive from the very beginning. But of course, with friends, I still, well, not with close friends, but when I go out here, I don't live here anymore. I'm here right now, but I live in a different city. But when I go out here and I speak about veganism, of course, there are a lot of folks and there are a lot of misconceptions because it's a very small city in the countryside of São Paulo state. But overall, I would say that especially in Brazil, veganism is growing quite a lot. I would say that in the last 5 years, we have seen amazing progress. And I think the reality in bigger cities such as São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro is very different. I think people respect veganism much more nowadays. And I would say that it's difficult to find someone who would say that it's the wrong thing to do. I think most people will say that it's hard and they're not willing to take that decision because they think it's too restrictive and they like to eat, you know, the things that they're used to eating. But it's hard to find someone who would say it's the wrong thing to do. I think most people will agree that ethically speaking, it's the right thing.
Wow, that's interesting. That's wonderful. That's very hopeful, actually. I really love that. I'd like to go to Alokparna to see whether that kind of resonates with you, because I know with India, there's a couple of things. Parts of India are vegetarian and you don't worship the cows. Other parts, the meat eating is growing. But I know dairy can be a bit of a sticking point when it comes to India for various reasons. I mean, I know some Western women who have got Indian gurus who say we must eat dairy or milk for various reasons. So I'm curious if what's your kind of reaction, certainly when you went from vegetarian to vegan within your communities, what was the reaction there and how is it now?
Yeah, so India is quite mistakenly thought of as the vegetarian country because it's not. Parts of North India are heavily vegetarian with a lot of dairy intake, like you said. But where I stay, it's in the south of India, 98.5% are non-vegetarians. I mean, are not vegetarians. And where I come from, which is West Bengal, again, 98.4% are consume animal products. Having said that, when I told that, hey, I'm going to go vegetarian for the first time to my parents, my father said, okay, leave everything, but at least have fish, because as people from West Bengal, our main diet is sort of fish. So, which was sweet and ignorant of him. But then I said that, no, I'm going to leave everything. What was most a problem was my friends, not my friends, my distant relatives who felt a little bit of pity for me that I was missing out on something. And they didn't realize that it was my conscious choice that I didn't want to, and that would make me suffer if I had animal products. So a lot of the times, now it's very different, but till about 4 or 5 years back, they would say that they would show me meat while they were eating at the same table and try to make me feel jealous as if it would, or ridicule me. But things again have changed, like Carolina said. There's a lot more awareness, and now everybody comes to me and says, I wish I could, and I am trying to, which is such a change from like 10, 11 years back when I went vegan. So yeah, so it's nice now, yeah.
Brilliant, I love that. Very good, wonderful. What about you, Claire?
It's interesting, isn't it? I actually became vegan before I knew it existed. And I knew what the word was, but I didn't actually know what it was. And I remember coming back from New Zealand. I was living there for 4 years, and it was actually my immediate family, my partner, who we both witnessed what was going on in New Zealand and some of the horrendous cruelty around the hunting industry and the dairy industry, which we saw firsthand. It's quite a small country. And so he came back and watched all the videos and then said, I'm sorry, we've got to sit down, we've got to watch this. And the whole family came vegan on the spot. That was me, my partner, and the 2 dogs at the time. But my extended family haven't quite made that sort of journey. And whilst my sister has made a lot of moves and goes to vegan festivals actually in the UK and shares certain things with me, it always reminds me it's so difficult for us to influence our family because of what I call the games, dances and dynamics and the history and the raised eyebrow that may need something very different when you're talking to a stranger. It has a whole history that goes back decades. And so that's quite difficult. And so I think if you want to change the world, you need to get out on the street or get out in the world and do things. But in terms of your family, I think we just need to lead by example. But in terms of other people, I guess, I had a nice experience recently before we were under lockdown. And I'm originally an organizational psychologist. And I was doing quite a big rollout for a large organization. And I gave a copy of one of my books to the general manager. And it was all about, well, why won't people change and what can we do about it? And my story is in there. And she said, Claire, I've known you 3 years. I didn't know you were vegan. And I said, that's interesting. She said, gosh, you're actually quite nice. You know, I really like you. And of course, I was able to dispel a lot of her myths and things. And I think if we can be, you know, really interesting, reasonable, open-minded, generous people who just happen to be vegan and have a passion and a non-speciesist view, I think we can really be leaders for change every day.
Absolutely. Love that. Wonderful. And Kathy?
Yeah, originally my family were, anti, and they'd mock me and all that kind of stuff. But when I started publishing vegan books, they were very supportive. My dad's very proud. He sells them in his shop. My mum's been a huge supporter. She's been with me through all the events, and, you know, every book launch I've been to, my family always attends. So they're very supportive of the work, of the publishing work. And my mum is now vegetarian, and my dad is closely following, and my siblings are, you know, they're aware, as Claire said, that family is the hardest obstacle I've found as well. And I found the public a lot more open when they don't know you to go vegan. So all my friends are vegan, so I've never had a problem with friends and colleagues. I'm working with just a couple of people, so it hasn't been a problem either.
Yeah, got it. Wonderful. So thank you all for sharing those experiences. And it's great to hear that things are changing. And I think that was quite funny what Claire said when people go, but I like you, you're nice, and you're a vegan. It's like, oh my gosh. So I love that. Yeah, we've really got to put it out there that vegans come from all walks of life. We're very diverse, and yes, we've got sense of humor and all the rest of it. But I think it's great that those perceptions are changing. Now, I'd like to talk to you all a little bit about what your experience has been particularly as a vegan woman, in the animal advocacy and vegan movements. There are a lot of women in this movement, but often it tends to be, and this is not an anti-men thing or anything like that, but often male voices do tend to be elevated, you know, in general, above women's, and particularly above women of colour and women from other kinds of minority areas. So I'd love to hear about your experiences as a vegan woman in the animal advocacy and vegan movements, both negative, if you're willing to share, and positive, of course. I'd like to start with Kathy. And Kathy, I'm particularly keen to get your points of view, because you're a disability rights advocate. I know you're very public about this. You have 2 medical conditions that, you know, don't always allow you to do certain things like standing around for long times on protests, etc. And you also have Asperger's, which you talk about on your blog and on your YouTube and your Instagram. So I'm curious if you can talk, you know, particularly around any challenges you might have faced as a vegan woman with those issues in mind, and how you've overcome them.
Okay. I guess it is about the in-person stuff, and there's a lot of vegans doing things at home, like on social media, or they're publishing blogs and stuff, and they can't get out to protests or cubes, and they just don't have the physical or otherwise the strength to do that and be present. So I suppose one message I would share is that not everybody can do everything, and everyone's got their niche that they can get involved in that suits their capabilities and their abilities at the time. And because you've seen them out once doesn't mean they can do it every week or every month or whatever. And I think just don't make assumptions about people based on like, I'm here tonight. To get here tonight has been like a lot. Like there's a lot of things I have to go through all day or for a couple of days to do this sort of thing. And I think even visible people like me that are doing advocacy and, you know, do occasionally come to public stuff, it doesn't mean they can always do it. So I would just say, always be kind. And in my talk for VegfestUK, I was talking about, yeah, just have an open heart for people. And we need to be good to our fellow vegan activists. And it's a long road and we don't want people to burn out. So I would say that, yeah, just support each other and be understanding that we're not all the same.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Carolina, if I can come to you, because and particularly as a woman who's a leader, you know, you've headed up you're heading up this organization, you know, you've been involved in all these others. What experience has that been? And particularly, you know, sometimes we might think of, you know, certain cultures having quite a macho culture, and similar to how in the West, you know, there's the whole patriarchy, I mean, is everywhere, obviously. Can you talk a little bit, speak to a little bit about your experience, any experiences you might have had as a vegan woman that you think you might not have had as a male, and how you dealt with that?
Yeah, I think overall what I would say, like especially in the international scenario, I think things are changing a lot as well. I think we are seeing more and more women on leadership roles, and I think that makes it easier and easier for us, you know, to establish ourselves as vegan leaders. We are part of 2 large international networks of NGOs, and we still see that, I think mostly, yeah, we still see a lot of men in the key leadership roles, but I think the participation of women is growing quite steadily. So I would say that it's becoming easier and easier. I think also when I worked with investigations, in the beginning, it was very dominated by men. And I would say that it was challenging, but it was also a very good learning school, because I really had to fight for myself and to establish myself there. And some of them were some of my best teachers in life. I learned a lot with some of the men I worked with when I was doing investigations. It was not always easy, but it was surely something that made me stronger. Yeah, and I think the feeling I have is that, as I said, the younger movement is quite good, and it's becoming more and more diverse, or at least more aware of the need of being diverse. I think when, like, for example, when we had the movement Black Lives Matter, I think that has brought a lot of change and a lot of awareness in the movement as well. And I think it's going to help us to be better at it. But when I still face, I wouldn't say discrimination, but when I still face prejudice, I would say that it mostly comes from people who have been in the movement for a long time and who are kind of used to doing things in a very kind of old-fashioned way. But the new I think we are going to face so many problems. It's changing fast, and it's looking very positive, in my opinion.
Great. No, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I get what you're saying. It's like, it's sort of, people kind of hanker back to the, well, we've always done it like this, and there's always that bit of resistance to change, but certainly that's positive to hear in terms of the younger people coming through. What's your experience with that, Alokparna? Can you relate to what Carolina is saying? How is that situation in India in terms of women in the vegan and animal advocacy movements?
Animal advocacy movements, definitely, like, I think 80 to 90%, okay, maybe 70 to 80% are women, but people who are known are the men. People who are known in the movement are men, unless you're a celebrity or something of that sort. So it's been a challenge to, you know, put yourself out there and say that, okay, it's also because there is just so much patriarchy, right? What you're talking about. Even just going out and saying, hey, I'm assertive, I'm talking to you, I am confident about what I speak, you're pushed aside like, okay, just go back. Especially if you're vegan, if you're an animal advocate and vegan, then because I remember when I was speaking to a top management person at a prestigious research institute, and that person just said, oh, are you just waiting to get married? Or does your father have a lot of money? You emotional women. I'm sure men must go through something. They must be told that they're not choosing the correct career if they're in animal movement and the animal advocacy movement, but they're not spoken to like this that we are. So, but I'm hoping, and there are also a lot of men around and other people around who are very encouraging, and the culture hopefully is changing, and thankfully women are also now seen at leadership positions, including me. So we are now responsible for that culture to change.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's kind of, and you're right. Yeah. People would just not say, they would never say that to a man. Are you just waiting around to get married? No one would ever say that to a man in any culture, I don't think. So, wow. Thank you for sharing, Alokparna. Claire, curious about your experience as a vegan woman, because also you mesh your, well, I guess everybody does, but your professional life with your animal advocacy, what with being a vegan psychologist and, you know, all that kind of thing. So any kind of experience that you'd like to speak of, you know, even within your professional networks, you know, like if you say people in your psychology networks or your human resources kind of networks reacting to you as a female and an animal advocate?
Well, it's interesting. I always sometimes feel I'm letting the side down somehow because I originally trained as an organizational psychologist. I've always been used to being in a sort of man's world, so to speak. And I had a great mother who was very feminine, but was very strong. She never actually went back or had a career, and she stayed at home and looked after us. But she taught me how to talk to people, I think, and hold my own, which was, you know, she was very prominent in the church and she was quite active there. And I think that actually taught me quite a bit. And so, but I also think that the title of psychologist means that often behind closed doors, the men and the women will say, hey, by the way, can I talk about this? And so I often see the soft underbelly of a lot of people, male and female. And so I've certainly, in women's leadership, so to speak, in this movement, I've only ever started to experience the politics of this actually when I've gone to the US. And I haven't really experienced it in Australia or in the UK or in other places, but in the US particularly, a sort of sense that I was new on the block. You've only been around a decade, and I'm quite intolerant of that sort of thing, because I think we need to all get our egos out of the way. And you know, people, for me, if I meet someone who's been doing this 6 months and they're really good at something, let's put them forward. You know, it's actually not about us. You know, we need to get out of the way of our egos and do what is right for animal liberation. And so, yeah, and I think in the general sort of world, so to speak, because I've been called in as a consultant, usually around the team building and the communication sort of training, I'm often the person who's sort of facilitating the groups. And if I've had a sort of checkered career, this means I'm just getting older, I guess. But I remember the reason I trained at one stage to be a psychotherapist and counselor was because through my organizational work, primarily men in senior positions like CEOs and senior managers would get me in to do something very grown up and masculine, like, you know, making them more productive or changing culture or something. But behind closed doors, they said, my life's falling apart. I don't know how to manage people. I don't know who I am without this job. And so that soft side's always been sort of shown to me in many ways. And so I think I've used all those skills to come together and try to meet people at a level of where they're at, regardless of what their gender is.
I like that. Thank you. That kind of leads nicely on to my next question, was what qualities do you believe are important as a leader, to be a leader? I mean, we've seen in terms of leadership, it's an interesting concept because traditionally leadership has sort of been seen as somebody having a position of power over other people, whereas now I think we're seeing quite a shift. I recently read one of Brene Brown's books around leadership, Dare to Lead, I think it was called, and it's about almost the opposite. It's about a leader is someone who actually helps other people to become leaders, something to what you touched on, Claire, and, you know, being vulnerable and opening up and not seeing that as a weakness. So I'm curious, what do you think, each of you, what qualities do leaders, good leaders, need to possess? And if you can give an example of a quality or a skill that you've used to have a positive outcome. Let's start with Alokparna.
Okay. I think the first quality is that you need to listen to people, because you can't be a leader without knowing and without understanding what others are going through. So, and I also think leadership, hearing people or listening to people is important, because I think I'm a very good listener. But having said that, it's also very important to pass on the mic and not, hold on to it yourself. Let people lead their work and create more leaders, like you said, like uphold people and give them the opportunity. Because a lot of the times what we've also seen, I've also faced it, where people have spoken to me and saying, oh, this person, this woman, but that's a man constantly holding the mic and talking. When are you going to pass the mic on to me? And similarly be it with gender issues, religion issues, any minorities, castes, especially in India, we try to be saviors and we come and speak on behalf of them, but we should just allow them, give them their moment on the stage. And I think that is very important for any walk of life, with employees, with your staff, or with individual leaders in the movement.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point. I think listening, and especially effective listening, like some people, and I think we can all be guilty of it. I know I've been guilty of it, when you're listening, but you're not actually actively listening, you're listening ready to jump in and speak. So I totally hear what you're saying about, really important to have that active listening. Thank you for sharing that. Kathy, so your latest book is about ethical leadership. So curious to get your definition of what qualities and skills does a good leader need to put into play, and what have you done to activate that in your own life, in your own advocacy?
As I say in the book, I think the foundation to be a great leader is to firstly be an ethical vegan. So I think everybody should be vegan, and leadership comes from those vegan values. One of the qualities that I think for leadership that I want to, instill is to be yourself. Like, everybody's a leader, but in their own way. And I think really being yourself and just being who you are creates more confidence. And I think as vegan women, once I've seen vegan women, I coach women in as authors, first-time authors. When they come, they don't have the confidence to be a public figure. But once they really get into themselves, who they are and what they want to do, once their confidence skyrockets, then they're unstoppable. I think vegan women with confidence are unstoppable. So I believe that instilling confidence in others is a great leadership quality.
Wonderful. And I think you certainly do that. I know Kathy's one of the most generous collaborators that I've met. You're always very generous in, as Alokparna said, passing the mic and lifting women up, making them feel good and feel confident. So thank you for sharing that. Carolina, tell us what your thoughts are on the qualities and skills needed to be a good leader, and which of those can you give us an example of how you embody those?
Sure. For me, one of the most important things is self-awareness and emotional balance. So I usually send myself to silent meditation retreats twice per year, and I meditate daily, because I think my intentions and the role I play in the organization and the way I lead the team and I treat them as individuals is very, very important. So I think it's very important for me to be fully aware of what I'm feeling, of what I'm doing, and I think it's the most responsible way of leading people and leading organization. And that also helps us be, more active and kind listeners. And I think it also helps us build what I usually call a healthy ego, because all of us have an ego. It's very difficult to get rid of your ego completely, but your ego has to be healthy. It's not only about you, it's about people, and it's about a very important cause. So you have to be able to see your ego clearly and to manage it well. That's what I would say.
I love that. I think that comes up because sometimes we think about leadership, about leading others, but you can't really lead others until you lead yourself. And a lot of leadership is about self-leadership. And so I love what you shared there, and absolutely a great strategy. I've been meditating quite a bit this year, and it's amazing what impact it can have and completely shift your perspective. Like you say, when you're caught up in those negative sides of egos, making up stories about, oh, this person did something, therefore it means this. And, you know, that's often not very helpful. So thank you for sharing that. Claire, so you're the kind of, as you say, you've been involved in organizational psychology, you know, in organizations, you've seen the kind of worst and the best of humanity in a lot of ways, plus your communications specialist. So talk to us a little bit about what you feel are the qualities and skills needed to be a good leader, and which of those, I mean, I know you embody quite a lot of them, but just talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, if everybody is, what everyone is offered is, I almost want to say, yeah, absolutely the same, from listening to self-awareness to the generosity to what you do on a daily basis to get your ego out of the way, or have a, you know, good ego, so to speak. I always say to people, have you ever noticed when you've got a problem, you're always there? And so a question I get people to ask is whatever is happening in your life, constantly ask yourself, what is my part in creating this? And also to hold back your assumptions. I call them myths, unquestioned assumptions that says, this is what is going on. We jump to conclusions. And I think at this time, when there is a lot of pressure around, there's a lot of polarization we're seeing on social media, there's a lot of anxiety because people aren't out there doing the things they would normally do with the public, so to speak, or with animals. And they feel a lot of things are going on behind the scenes that we just can't get to. And we see this polarization. And I think when there's a lot of fear and a lot of stress, literally people's blood rushes to the back of the brain. They're operating at their amygdala, a very emotional response. And I've never seen so much attacking of other people and jumping to conclusions. And I just encourage people to just hold back. And whenever we hear something, or whenever our reaction is out of proportion to the threat, it's usually because someone's pressed a button. And I always say to people, it doesn't matter how outlandish it sounds or whatever people are saying, just go, well, it might feel a little bit out there, but you know, maybe there's something you know that I don't, tell me more. And I think that humility and vulnerability that we can have, and we can always learn something. So I don't think there's one skill per se, is, I guess, around integrity and authenticity, absolutely. But it's to embody a lot of those things. Be the vegan you would have liked to have met before you became vegan. That's probably a good one.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. Thank you very much for sharing that, Claire. I noticed we've got some audience questions, so I'm just going to pause there to take some of the questions. So we've got Nishma from Shamboos. Hi, Nishma. And she has a question for Alokparna. Nishma, Shamboos is a wonderful vegan catering company in the UK, Alokparna, just to give you a little background. So Nishma is saying, traditionally, India has a vast amount and very creative vegan, and she's put vegan with an asterisk, which I think means vegan/vegetarian cuisine. Do the younger generation of Indian population have a preference between traditional cuisine and Western cuisines?
Yeah, thanks, Nishma, for the question. What we've seen over the past 5 to 10 years is that meat eating is some sort of an aspirational view. So because at least in India, vegetarianism is very limited to religious vegetarianism. Slowly the vegan movement, because of ethics, because of environment and health, is growing. But even as a child, even as an adult, I was very opposed to vegetarian restaurants because it meant that I was religious, or it had something to do with God or something of that sort. Having said that, I think unfortunately, it took COVID-19 to sort of tell people what is going on with, what is wrong with factory farming and abuse of animals. But people are slowly moving or thinking that vegan food is also cool. Otherwise, it was very, if I can say, non-sexy, unsexy. Vegetarian and vegan food were very non-sexy. So a lot has to do with the younger generation, younger vegan activists or advocates and the plant-based businesses which are coming now. And it's not difficult. 10 years back, it was very difficult. We didn't have any vegan butter or vegan cheese in India. And now we're actually producing it in India. So I think people intrinsically are very nice. If you can replace whatever they love with, they don't care if it's coming from animals or not. So I think that's the thing that we've learned, and I'm hoping it will change. So I don't know if I've answered that question. Traditional
versus Western.
Between traditional and Western, youngsters, of course, you know, Western food, burgers, pizzas, pastas, whatever is not cooked at home is much cooler. But there has also been a change in how to, you know, going back to traditional food nowadays. So a lot of the restaurants, a lot of popular chefs are going back to the authentic food, like what was cooked on wood fire and things like that. So the way of cooking has also, they're trying to make it sexy. So, and I'm saying the word sexy constantly because it needs to be attractive, that's all. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alokparna. I hope that's answered your question, Anishma. Coral has asked a question. She's saying, I'm a vegan of 13 years and would be interested to know, what would you say to people who are concerned about the jobs that can potentially be lost if we move to a more vegan world? I believe we just need to shift our emphasis and think of work in other industries, but would be interested in your perspective. This is for all the panelists or to anyone who'd like to answer. Also, there's an argument that veganism isn't the answer in terms of the environment, particularly soil health. I know there are strong arguments in water and land use and so on. Yeah, I mean, for the purposes of that, we might be able to touch on that. For the purposes of this panel, we're kind of focusing on women and vegan women as leaders in the vegan movement. It's if there's anyone that you know is a specialist in environment and soil health, but I think we'll ask the panelists about in terms of the job losses. I mean, I can just briefly speak to that as someone who works in the vegan business arena. I think that's a kind of a myth that there's going to be a lot of jobs lost. That's why I think we need the support of governments to actually help transition people to different types of employment, because it's not that the jobs will go, certain jobs in certain industries will go, but they don't have to just shut down and, you know, people are going to be homeless and jobless. It's about transitioning them to workplaces and to industries that are actually better for them, because as we know, you know, in the slaughterhouses, the conditions, and I'm sure Carolina can speak to this. Also, we know that this happens in some fruit and vegetable farming. We don't want to gloss over the fact, you know, humans are exploited in our food systems as well. So is the environment and so are animals. But I think it's really about getting governments on board and switching. It's the same with fuel, you know, moving away from these environmentally unfriendly energy systems to more eco-friendly ones. You're changing the type of energy, and the same, we're changing the type of food, but you're still creating jobs. So that's kind of my perspective on that. I don't know, does anyone, if you just want to raise your hand, any of the panelists, would you like to touch on any of that? Yes, Carolina, go for it.
Yes, I don't know where the argument comes from that we would have less jobs. But the thing that came to my mind when I read the question is that factory farming actually it doesn't employ a lot of people. It's a very efficient way of producing meat, dairy, and eggs in a very cruel way as well. And very few people are employed. And I also think that if we move towards veganism, it's not going to be overnight. The way it usually happens is that there is more consumer demand for vegan products. So maybe companies will stop producing meat products to start producing plant-based alternatives. So it's a kind of slow transition. And I think the market most of the times will be able to adjust itself, but of course government support will be very important. And I also think we need to think about the model of veganism we want to have. So do we want to have vegan products that are sourced from soy monocultures that destroy ecosystems in Latin America and elsewhere in the world? No, we don't want that. We also want, and I think we have to work in a way to build a vegan world where people understand that, you know, there are options that you can source from, and you should opt for ethical sources of vegan products as well. And that's totally possible. And if we work like with small and medium scale agriculture systems, I don't think we are going to lose jobs. I have the feeling that we are going to create more jobs. But of course, you know, we need a proper study to assess that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just touching briefly, Coral, on your argument about it's not just about veganism. I think what you said something about veganism isn't the answer in terms of the environment. I think it's more appropriate to say it's not the only answer. I think it's a very important one, but of course there are other aspects, such as what Carolina's just touched on. You know, it's a case of bringing together everything and working out what is the best system. But I guess as a baseline, at least with veganism, it's the least cruel, certainly in terms of animals, you know, taking animals out of the commercial system, you know, commodifying them and exploiting them, have that as a base. But then absolutely we have to work on how to do that in a beneficial way for people and for the planet as well. So thank you for your question. Nishma's got another question. In some cultures, this is an interesting one. In some cultures, women do not upsell their skills as it's considered boasting or ego. How do we change that? That's a great question. Kathy, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely an issue, and it does all come back to confidence, and because men are constantly selling themselves, and you know, women do need to speak up, take opportunities. If you're asked to speak, go for it, just give it a go. And I know it is kind of like a selling thing, and you know, some minority groups will not have the same level of confidence as other people, and we need to be aware that we need to seek out women, like with vegan women with speaking opportunities and things, to seek out. And I mean, Katrina's even helped me a lot with, you know, support where you know, you might not think you can do it, for in my case in a disability way, but you know, that other people will have their blocks to why they think they can't. Or a lot of vegan women come to me and say, oh, I'm not on that level yet. And where Claire was saying, you know, you need to be in the industry or in the movement for a number of years to be, you know, worthy of a speaking position or a blog post or whatever. And it's not about worthiness. It's about everybody having an opportunity to say what they want to say and to have a spotlight on them. So yeah, it's about confidence. And I think everybody should be given an opportunity.
Wonderful. Alokparna, you touched on earlier about the mic, like people, you know, handing the mic over, you know, particularly men kind of hanging onto the mic. How do women grab the mic? I mean, how would you go about that?
I think the Vegan Women's Leadership Network is a beautiful example of that, right? So more women coming together, one helping each other, because the narrative has always been that women are not women's friends. And that's been the worst for everyone. Even as many youngsters, many girls say that, oh, I'm friends only with men or only with boys. Women are always jealous of each other. That's such a wrong narrative. And as we grow up, I mean, I'm in my 30s, and now it's been some time since I've realized that friendships of women and just like the network of women is just so strong and so powerful, and we can just help each other. So seek help, talk to each other, vent. And don't think of, I mean, I think what Claire also said was that assumptions have to be dropped, and just be your authentic self. So be vulnerable. I'm a huge fan of Brené Brown. So yeah, the vulnerability aspect is definitely very important.
Yeah. And in terms of the cultures, I know, because Nishma is saying, you know, in some cultures women don't upskill this. I mean, I think that's true of a lot, but particularly in certain cultures, that's even more so. How have you sort of managed to do that in India? I mean, how have you is it a case of you've just kind of like literally knocked on the door and said, hey, is it about what Kathy said about just having that confidence and saying, hey, you know, you've got this conference, whatever, or this event's happening, you've got all men on, I'm just as qualified, let me in. Is it a case of kind of, you know, being that up front and just having that self-confidence to be able to do that?
You need to elbow out.
Elbow your way.
You need to elbow your way in, otherwise they won't let you speak. And as women, we're always told to keep quiet, listen, and then if people give an opportunity, then speak. So I think we need to stop that ourselves too, because even now I feel the pressure. I still struggle in putting myself out there constantly. So I've had to do those things, whether it's a quote in a press release or, you know, just having an opportunity and literally taking the mic and saying, okay, I have a conversation, especially, you know, being from an animal advocacy organization. the government is not going to take you seriously. Others are not going to take you seriously because you're an NGO. So women in an NGO for animals, not even for humans, huge minority. So yeah, you have to elbow your way in.
I love that. I'm going to come on to Carolina and Claire in a moment, but something that you said reminded me, and I can't remember the exact statistics, but it was something bizarre about how when there's a job advertised, like men who are like ridiculously underqualified for the position will apply for it, like completely blasé and assume that they can do it. Whereas women who would probably be overqualified for the job are constantly like questioning themselves, oh, maybe I don't have the exact skills. And it certainly does seem to be a bit of a mindset. So on that, Claire, tell us your thoughts on that. You know, how do we change this? How do we put ourselves forward?
Yeah, well, I'll just pick up on what you've just said there, because there is quite a bit of research around that. And it seems to be that when you have the same job being advertised, it appears to be, and this is only generally, that the men applying are pretty satisfied to give it a go at about, if they know about 30% of their ability to do it, sort of thing. With women, it's about 80%. So it almost, in theory, should always take the woman because she's well able to even do it. But that's a confidence thing. So someone who says, gosh, I can do about 20-30%, says the guy, he's happy to give it a go. But that's on average, of course. And it also is, if you give two people the same, you could have exactly the same job, and you could have one job that is being advertised at 80,000, and exactly the same job will be advertised at 250. And you immediately get a shift. You get more women applying for the lower paid one, and more as the men sort of, it'll go up the more the salary is, even though the job actually being advertised is exactly the same and it's got the same resume. So this is quite socially, culturally, but also personally, it is what's actually happening there, of course. So, but the research also tells us that there actually is greater variability within the sexes than actually between them, except on things like physical strength. Now, that's quite surprising to us, of course, but we're not in isolation. We've got these social and cultural and our own myths, our own assumptions about what is actually possible. But I want to just say something like Kathy was building on, is confidence. And we're not really afraid of what other people think about us at all, or when they come back to us. I think we're afraid of our feelings in relation to what people do, to feel silly or humiliated or angry. And when we actually learn to deal with our own feelings, our own reactions to things, we'll be able to deal with whatever actually happens on the outside, and then match that, I think, with words to say, it's not okay to say that, or, you know, this is where it stops. So be quite assertive about that. We don't have to be aggressive, but we have to say, when we say no to other people, we do say yes to ourselves.
Nice. Thank you, Claire. Carolina, did you want to add anything on that?
Yes, I think a lot of very important things have been said already. The only thing that I would add is that what I constantly notice in my team is that women tends to have an excess of self-criticism, and they constantly want to do things better. And that comes from a position in which they feel that they're never good enough. So I try to work with them, often saying, you are already amazing and you should celebrate and go out and speak out, because you are amazing already, and don't try to be perfect. None of us are perfect, and we will never be. So of course we can work with ourselves to get better, to improve, but that has to be done in a very gentle way, and in a way that it doesn't mean that you will be telling yourself all the time that you're not good enough. So that's what the exercise I like to practice with the team.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. There's some really good advice there. I'm just going to chime in a little bit there as well, because one of the things you said, Nishma, is about this whole, it's so interesting. It kind of is the opposite to what Carolina has just said. It's like we tend to undervalue ourselves, and then when we do put ourselves forward to just say, well, actually, yeah, I can do this. Like what Claire said, you know, I'm good at that. You know, it's somehow we think, oh my God, that's boasting. And it's not, it's just simply stating a fact. I'm good at this. I can do this job. I can, do you see what I mean? So, and And I think as well, I think particularly in activist circles, and I know Claire and I have had these conversations, we kind of do have to get confident with selling and putting ourselves forward, whether it's selling ourselves, you know, our skills, or selling our message. You know, at the end of the day, we need to get comfortable with that and not shy away from it. And I think it's particularly important for, it's not like we're trying to sell dodgy secondhand cars. Do you know what I mean? We're actually selling something important, and, you know, you putting yourself forward, you know, you're doing the world a good service. So I think try and kind of flip it on its head. Instead of seeing it as, oh, we're boasting, it's more a case of, hey, you know, if I get this opportunity, look at all the amazing things I can do. So that's maybe a little mind shift. But I do think as activists, you know, in the animal advocacy movements, we do have to get more comfortable with that self-confidence and putting ourselves forward and not saying, oh, we're being boasting. We're just, you know, we're like Carolina said, we are all amazing, and that's good. So I hope that answers your question, Nishma. Thank you. That was a really great question. We've got one from Yuko. Hello, Yuko from Japan. Lovely to see you here. Yuko's asking, tradition is a magic word for justifying what we've been doing. How do we handle traditional values while promoting veganism? That's a great question. Carolina, we'll start with you on that.
Well, that's challenging. If I think about my own, the tradition where I grew up, it's very hard to tell people that it's not right to exploit animals, because, you know, it's a cowboy land, and it's so rooted. I think the best way to explain is maybe to use history and to use historical events where societies had to change because people were not being treated right. And that's going to come with animals as well. And I think what is very important as well to avoid, and I think Melanie Joy is very good at explaining that, it's that you should say it in a way that people don't feel offended. You have to find a way to explain that culture changes for very good reasons, but without blaming people personally. So that's usually the way I try to do it. But it's not easy. It's not an easy thing.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. That's great. Alokparna.
As an organization and as an organization, we've always used the ahimsa because it's easier to use in India, the whole this thing of art of non-violence, principle of non-violence. But of course, that doesn't always work. Unfortunately, there are a lot of discriminations. So, you know, the upper caste Hindus are generally vegetarian, the so-called lower castes are not, and that's why vegetarian is seen with such a vegetarianism, and cow protection is seen with it's not an animal welfare issue, it's a political issue. However, I think one of the nicest things that have come out from one Supreme Court order is that tradition and culture cannot be an excuse for animal abuse. And for tradition, we can't, let go of our future. So, you know, for traditional things like, and factory farming, for example, was never traditional. It's just because of our greed for production that it has led to this. So if you really care about tradition, go back to, let go of all your technologies, go back to how things used to be produced. So in a, of course, much more friendly manner, like Carolina said, because we can't offend people. Imagine, we always have to put ourselves in those shoes and talk about them. But I think COVID is because out of all the bad stuff that COVID has gotten us, I think it's a big reminder that how wrong we are, how wrong the world is going especially with abuse to animals. So hopefully this can be a wake-up call for all of us.
Fantastic, thank you. Claire, would you like to say something about that?
Well, it's interesting, Katrina. We've talked about this at great length. Anything to do with tradition is an unquestioned, and those assumptions.
Claire, can I just pause you? Sorry, Claire, we just lost you a little bit there.
Oh, it's okay. I think that's coming back now, is it?
Yeah. Just maybe start the sentence again. Yeah, great.
Lovely. So I was just saying that, you know, and you and I have talked about this, and I know with Kathy, because we live in the same sort of city, is the whole notion of tradition is, you know, we've always done it like this. And I think it becomes part of our identity, our collective identity and our personal identity. And I talk about those myths, those unquestioned social and cultural, familial, personal assumptions that say, that sort of make sense of somebody's worldview in many ways. And because often people's reaction is out of proportion to the threat. Is most people don't want to go around and be sick, trash the environment, abuse animals, or be seen to be greedy. And yet often our behaviors, our consumer behaviors obviously result in that. And so changing that is, I think it's realizing that we're not looking at the bigger context, the existential context in which people make sense of their lives. People resist change because they try to make objective their world. And I agree with Alokparna, is we've had some major changes now that have shown us we cannot continue like this. It's almost as if Mother Nature has jumped back to say, you know, you can't do this anymore. So we're waiting with open arms for people to wake up and to actually take their part in the mess we've caused in many ways.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, obviously, you know, in terms of what you said about with communication skills, which I know is one of your specialities. And I know Carolina touched on that about when you're talking to people, you know, you're saying it in such a way so as not to offend them. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Claire, because you are the queen of communication. Could you perhaps give us an example of that? So say someone, you know, they're having a conversation, and then the pushback is, oh, well, you know, that's not how we've done things. You know, you're offending out traditional values. What could somebody say to say it in a kind of kind way that maybe the person would actually hear without getting offended?
Yes, of course. I think, firstly, avoid ping pong. If somebody asks you that question and we feel we want to immediately answer, and then they come back with their answer, people don't expect us to ask them a question. So when they say, oh, this is our tradition, we've always done it, just say, what do you mean? Tell me more. Firstly, you come into the world of that audience so that you're able to position, you know, are they a person who teaches cultural studies at university, or are they someone who just, you know, feels very strongly in their village? And so by asking a question, we get to know the audience and we can position the answer. And often people just want to have their say. They get all that sort of steam out of them, so to speak. Also gives us a moment to think about this. So, you know, it's always been our tradition. What do you mean by tradition? Okay. And to ask them a few more questions about that. And actually, so you get a definition of tradition. We've always done it like this. This is what we've always done. And I say, well, you know, aside from the thing we're talking about at the moment, it is about animals. Are there things in your life or your community where things that used to work no longer work? And the person may bring up things about, you know, the age at which children start work, or women's rights, or control of their own reproduction, or something. You get them talking generally about things, so that we're talking about traditions and their value now or in the future, or as new information comes to light, you know, it's time to change. And then you bring them into the issue around animals. And most people don't want to put their hands up and say, it's okay to hurt animals. It's getting that to them, but you need it to come out of their mouth. And I think that's get people to defend what they're saying rather than us going back and trying to convince them of something else, would be my sort of answer there. But another thing I would also say is we can't offend people without their permission.
That's true. That's true. That's very good. I love that. It's about that listening. It comes back to what Alokparna said about that active listening skill and asking questions and finding out more information. I love that. I think particularly that phrase, tell me more. I think that's one we can all go away with today, which is brilliant. Kathy, did you want to add anything to this particular question?
When I was doing the research for my current book, Golden Age Politics, I was looking at traditions, and with African and Indigenous activists, they're actually saying they're going back to their roots with plant-based food, and that their, you know, veganism wasn't invented by, you know, by white people. They were largely plant-based. So when people talk about traditions, you want to know, yeah, like Clay said, what traditions are you referring to? Secondly, what I'd say with the question of traditions, I come to veganism from a branding and a marketing perspective. So what I would do is acknowledge that people don't like change generally, and to say, how can we veganize traditions by saying, well, in Australia, for example, there's like a beer barbecue football culture. So, you know, you still can have your traditions in that way, but you can have vegan sausages on the barbecue, and you're still keeping up that tradition of getting together with your friends and watching football or whatever people like to do. You're not losing all your traditions. You're just creating a compassionate story there instead.
Brilliant. No, I love that. I hope that's answered your question, Yuko. Thank you. That was a really great question. So I hope that's given you some ideas about how to approach that topic where you are in Japan. Nishma's saying, thank you very much for taking my questions, and I'm loving being in the company of inspiring women. Yes, I agree. I'm feeling the same way. And if anyone's got any other questions, do use the Q&A. We've got around about another 20 minutes. So I've got a couple of questions I can ask, but I'd love to hear more audience questions. So if you have got a burning question, do use the Q&A chat box, and we'll come back to you shortly. So I'd like to ask you think about one moment or a scenario that you've experienced where you were supported by and uplifted by another vegan woman, and what that meant to you. Who'd like to start? Okay, I'm going to nominate, if you don't know who puts their hand up. Claire, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Somebody that has influenced me enormously is someone called Glenys Ugis, and people in Australia would immediately know her. Glenys Ugis is the Executive Director of Animals Australia, and she's been in animal social justice for coming up for 40 years. And often with Animals Australia, it's a household name, certainly in this country, but even around the world, because we've done a lot of work, particularly in the live export issue, is the front-facing person is Lynn White. And yet Glenys Ugis has been involved in this for 3 more decades than Lynn. And I love how a lot of the women in that organization actually do say, who's the best person for the job and how can we put it out there? And I just remember it was about 11 years ago when I became vegan, and I immediately became an activist as well. And I rang Animals Australia and said, what can I do? This is my background, what can I do? And had the great pleasure of pulling them all together actually to do a strategy session all that time ago. And there was only 7 of them in the organization at that stage. There's now over 35, I think. But and Glenys Ugis said, well, Claire, what we'd really like you to do is we're doing a big a number of rallies around the country. We'd love you to MC the Sydney one. And there were 3,000 people there. And it was my first big sort of gig, so to speak, in speaking about live exports. And I, you know, I'd been a speaker, I'd done a lot of that stuff, but I was new in this movement. And she said to me, you know, you can do this, Claire, you've got this. And we feel very safe in your hands. And that just, she's been a great inspiration to me over the years. I still do work with her behind the scenes, and we're good friends as well.
Oh, lovely. I love that. Thank you. Carolina.
Yes, I've been thinking a lot. And I think for me, it's very difficult to name one particular person. I think pretty much on a daily basis, I think our team, 80% of us are women. Some of them are working in very challenging countries where veganism is a very new thing. And I think just the fact that they come up with amazing progress so often, and they go out, they speak to the media, they face big companies, they go to very challenging meetings. And instead of coming to me and saying, you know, I had a hard day, I'm feeling stressed, they're just thankful and they're so happy for what they're doing. And I think that brings me up, that lifts me up every single day. And I would say that it's a team thing, and they are amazing, because when I'm feeling down and when I start to feel unsure about everything we do, because we do some very challenging things, when I see that they are happy facing all these challenges, that solves everything. And I constantly feel very grateful to be supporting them and to receive their support, I would say.
No, I love that. No, that's wonderful. Thank you. Alokparna, any particular experiences, any particular vegan women that have supported you and uplifted you?
So most of the vegan women I know have been because of the involvement in the movement. Unfortunately, not many outside, but of course, my colleagues who again, vegan women in my office, a few of them especially, because one person, in fact, she came in part-time, did know nothing about veganism, but when she left, and she left because she had to move abroad with her husband, she was completely vegan, and every single day she would support me. I mean, we would, you know, meet, our eyes would meet, and she would know I would be stressed and she'd come running and say, are you okay? And that's one of the things. And I think another colleague, she, in the lockdown, she every time we have a call, an update call on our campaigns, she's like, how are you feeling? And very few people even ask that, because it's the job of the boss to ask, are you guys okay? Nobody asks back the boss. And I think that's a huge support, just to be asked how you are. And the third one is she's much younger than me, but she again started volunteering with us at our organization many years back, and now she's at a senior management level. And I think she and her sister were fostering a kitten which I adopted, but the kitten died at the age of 11 months. And without saying a word, she just like, supported me emotionally so much. And I think 3 years later, my elderly dog died. And she just said, I'm there, I'm coming for you. And she got papaya plants with her because she knew that the dog loved papaya. So considering your dog as her dog, like somebody else's dog is your dog, because you know that they are so close to you. Just the whole ownership, and it was like a big tight hug, just getting those 2 papaya plants. And now every time we have a papaya from that tree, my parents always remember her. Our first ever pet, so very special. And I think those are the times I remember just the power of, again, sisterhood, and in this vegan sisterhood. So.
No, I love that. And it can be just something simple like that, like you say, like just asking you, how you feel, or, doing something small like that. It's amazing the impact that it can have on someone. Thank you for sharing that. Kathy, you wrote a whole book called Plant Powered Women, in which vegan women kind of shared their experiences and stories. So I'm sure it's going to be quite tricky for you to pick one, but perhaps in your own life, if there is maybe one person or one woman, vegan woman, that you feel has really kind of just helped to elevate you in some way.
Yeah,
I think I can guess who you're going to say, but I won't say it. Go on.
I'd like to acknowledge all the vegan women that I've ever collaborated with, firstly, because they're all amazing. But yes, there is one that I've been with my meditation teacher for 23 years. Her name's Supreme Master Jinghai, and definitely inspires my whole everything. So she has a slogan called "Be Vegan, Make Peace." It's a simple slogan, but it's inspired my new book, Golden Age Politics. Apart from being a meditation teacher, she has started a chain of vegan restaurants around the world called Loving Heart. She runs an international television station called Supreme Master Television. She's an artist, fashion designer, animal activist. She does a lot of things, though. Certainly that's got to be my pick.
Yeah, I was right. I knew you were going to say that. That's great. No, she is pretty amazing. It's wonderful. So we've got Erica is saying, hi, thank you for setting up this talk. It's very inspiring and engaging to watch. Thank you, Erica. Yeah, I think we're all enjoying it ourselves, taking part. Erica's also asking, I have a question. Does anyone have any, let me just move my chat. Any information besides meditation to help avoid general burnout with the movement? Claire, I might just throw that one over to you, because I know that's something you work a lot on, and you have some free courses and everything on it. So do you want to just speak briefly about that?
Sure, absolutely. I'm wholeheartedly behind meditation, absolutely, and not only just for our individual sort of quietening down of ourselves, slowing down the brain waves and being present, but also because there's some really cool stuff out there that shows us that thoughts really are things, and particularly when we come together in the collective, it affects the outer world. If you want to check that out, have a look at the peacefulcitiesproject.org, where people are specifically focusing on, say, creating peace in a certain area. We've all been trained to meditate and have that intention. And what we're knowing now, it's not only it's correlated with increased reductions in violent acts and accidents and felonies and all sorts of things during that period of people collectively meditating. It's now we're also showing cause and effect. So please go and have a look at that. But I think going back to basics as well is a whole food plant-based diet, having exercise. Sleep is absolutely essential. Isn't just something that we just rest and we feel we've just laid down for a while. There's not one organ in the body that is not affected positively or negatively. Positive if we sleep well, and negatively if we don't sleep well. So that's important as well. And gaining social support is another one, is having people around that champion you, that listen to you. and be out in nature, be around animals. Find something you love that sustains you when the going gets hard. Is it gardening? Is it sewing? Is it reading? Is it baking for people? Is it watching movies, uplifting ones? So all of these things I think are very important. There are a number of lots of programs on my website that are free, and one that comes to my mind is around the meditation piece, but also there are some other things on communication, and veganpsychologist.com. Go and have a look. So self-care, physical, emotional, and social.
Great. Laura's asking, what was the website you just mentioned? Was it Peaceful Projects, Claire?
Peaceful Cities.
Peaceful Cities.
Peaceful Cities. .org. I'm doing that from memory, of course.
There we go.
Peaceful
Cities. You just type in.
Yeah, there's a live stream actually of a lot of the research that's done that. It's in one of the videos on the veganpsychologist.com. The Peaceful Cities Project, I think, .org.
Great. We've got another question from Nishma. It's quite an interesting one. I think I understand what it means. It says, are women born leaders, but then we pass the baton to keep the peace? So my understanding, Nishma, you can correct me if I'm wrong, just type in, what you're saying is, are women actually born leaders, but we, in order to kind of keep the peace, you know, keep maybe traditions going on, we kind of pass the baton to others? Predominantly men. If I've misunderstood your question, I apologize, but that's kind of how I read that. So does anyone who'd like to jump in and answer that one? Alokparna, what do you think?
Leaders in their own sense, yes. Many people might not want to be born leaders, as long as they are doing what they want to do and where they want to be. I think that's enough. But we definitely pass the baton to keep the peace, whether it's for leadership or just to be heard. So I think born leaders, some people are born leaders, some people may not be, and there's nothing wrong with that. So people might just want to be behind the scenes and not be upfront and develop leadership in that sense. So I won't generalize, but we do pass the baton to people, and yeah, it's time to share it, not take it yourself completely, but share it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think as well, Nishma, it's kind of like, you know, it's that whole kind of, yeah, like you say, are people naturally born that way, or is it nature versus nurture? It kind of gets into that whole big thing. But I guess the important thing is if you feel like you want to lead in some way, and like you said, Alokparna, you mentioned people behind the scenes doing stuff. As far as I'm concerned, they're leaders too. I mean, we often think of leaders being kind of in the public eye, but I think people who are doing that stuff behind the scenes, you know, quietly and maybe not getting all the accolades, they're also leaders as well. So I think it's finding a type of leadership or a style of leadership that works for you, and that might change at different periods of your life as well. But certainly if you feel like, you know, there's a way that you want to step up, don't hold yourself back, I would say. Now I'm conscious of time. I think we've got about 5-10 minutes. I'm going to ask one final question, but if we might have time for a final audience question, we'll see. But what I would love to ask you is, what advice would you give to either women or young girls who are already in this space, in the vegan and animal advocacy movements, or they're wanting to come into the space? What advice would you give them in order to be able to find their voice and, you know, play a strong part in these movements? Kathy, let's start with you.
I think I'll just keep with my theme is don't be afraid to be yourself and get to know get to know your skills. Like if you're young, then try all different things. Don't be afraid to fail. Enjoy the process and collaborate with other people maybe that have more experience, and don't be afraid to reach out. Like definitely in my case, I'd be happy to get, you know, emails or Facebook friend requests or, you know, Instagram, whatever, from whoever is interested in getting involved, who'd like to collaborate, who'd like to be in my magazine or books or anything like that, especially young women. That would be amazing. Don't be afraid.
Lovely, thank you. Carolina, what advice would you give? Because you work with a lot, as you mentioned, you work with a lot of amazing women in various different countries. So what advice would you give to people, you know, perhaps listening to you today and thinking, oh, I want to get involved in some way? What advice would you give them?
Yes, I think being yourself is a very important thing, as Katie said. And I also think it's very important to choose what you want to do. What is the thing that matters the most to you, and what is the thing that you really want to make a difference? Because even in the movement, or in the vegan advocacy, or in the animal movement, there are many different roles and there are many different activities you can do. So I think choosing the one that really suits you is going to bring a lot of passion and a lot of resilience as well, for you to be able to go on and to kind of fight to be a leader. So I think choosing the right thing for you is very important.
Absolutely. And I think that ties back with what Kathy said, particularly it's okay to try some things, because sometimes you don't know what you might want to do, but you can try different things and you might realize, oh, I'm really strong in this area, and you didn't even realize it. I love that. Thank you very much. Claire.
Firstly, I agree with what you're saying about leadership. Is you don't have to be on the world stage. All of us are leaders. We can be thought leaders. We need to be leaders of our own lives. In fact, I think we need to do that first and foremost, and be the example we really want to be in the world. And I think, ask yourself, what is the thing that I do or naturally gravitate to that is almost like falling off a log? And is there something there, a sweet spot? You know, often people try to go into vegan businesses or so, and I always say to them, what were you always good at? And if it is, like Kathy has always been, is marketing and PR and getting people out there, for instance, is use that skill, take it from your everyday life and bring it into this movement. Some of us make cupcakes, some of us on the world stage. We don't need more leaders. We need good leaders. We need good female leaders, and we need good male leaders. And that starts with being a leader of your own life, I think. And would I follow me is a good question to ask yourself.
I like that. Would I follow me? I love that. Alokparna, what advice would you give to women, both globally, but also in India, where you're based as well, on who want to step forward? I mean, you're obviously a great role model, as all of you are, because you're leading the way and you're showcasing what that can look like. But yeah, just tell us any tips or advice you would give.
Firstly, I'd like to say that Claire is coming up with one-liners in every
she's
time
good,
she's
isn't
been.
She?
It's amazing. What advice would I give? I would give would be to take time and learn, and maybe unlearn some things too, and not be in a rush or a race to know everything at once. And especially with the burnout thing, a lot of people come into the movement romanticizing helping animals, and sometimes it's just draining work, regular desk jobs, or worse, working with the, not worse, but or more terrifying, working with the government where you're not considered anything. So give yourself time to learn, and give yourself the opportunity to unlearn some assumptions in your mind. And when you are tired, it's okay to be tired. It's okay to be exhausted and say, I can't do it anymore. I think those two things will help you be there for the long run. So that's what I would give. That's it.
Wonderful. That's all really good advice. So we are coming to the end now to wrap up. So I would like to thank all of those of you who are watching live. Thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you who asked questions, thank you. There were some great questions there. And for those of you who are watching the recording, I hope you're also inspired by this panel discussion. Thank you very much indeed to all our panelists, Claire, Kathy, Carolina, and Alokparna. If you would like to find out more about the Vegan Women's Leadership Network, which is a global ethical leadership community to help vegan women become leaders in their field, whatever that looks like, go to veganwomensleadershipnetwork.com. We also have a stand or a stall here at VegfestUK. It's a virtual stall. It looks very cool. I'm very excited by it. I will be there available to live chat for the next couple of hours. And there's also, you can see direct links there as well. There are annual and monthly options to join as a member, and you can also sign up as a subscriber to get the newsletter as well, to keep up to date with some exciting new initiatives. So again, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you very much to VegfestUK for giving vegan women leaders a platform to speak. And I think Tim has just joined us back. Hi, Tim.
Hello. Yeah, I've been listening in. It's just been great. It's really nice to just be able to sit back and listen to a team of very, very motivated, dynamic, different women voices, and just shut up and listen for once. And it's just fantastic. And I would heartily recommend all men listening, or, do advise your male friends to listen, because this is part of the key. and adopting some of the feminine principles, of replacing some of the toxic masculinity, and helping inspire confidence is what I've taken away from there. You know, we can work together by encouraging more women to step up and support women, inspire confidence, make space when it's needed. And we can do this together. We don't have to exclude men from seeing women come forward. And I think that's something for my male colleagues to take away, is don't be afraid, you know, be the opposite, embrace the feminine principles that underpin veganism. And I think we've seen from the recent pandemic, the countries that have been led by women governments and women at the helm of the governments have displayed those principles, completely the opposite of what we've seen from the toxic masculinity of some of the worst of the men leading the world. So on that note, I just say thank you so much, because that's really inspirational. Katrina, especially for your, you know, amazing energy to put this panel together. We've got another one tomorrow, and I'm really looking forward to it, and more to come. So thank you very much, all our panelists. Thank you too for the questions and for the people listening. It's been a very well attended webinar live. On that note, we should wrap up. Hopefully people go and visit our exhibitors, go to the chat rooms, go and have some talks, engage with the show, share it with your friends, come back tomorrow. And thank you very much once again for this wonderful panel from the Vegan Women's Leadership Network at VegfestUK Summerfest Online 2020. Thank you very much for attending. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.